They've stood at the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. From the courtroom to the classroom, Attorney Karen Jimeno brings sharp legal insight, academic excellence, and a voice that has guided national conversations. Attorney Mike Toledo, a seasoned public affairs strategist and legal mind with years in media, corporate leadership, and government reform. Together, they bring law to life with experience, integrity, and the courage to ask hard questions. Two minds shaped by the law. Two voices trusted in and out of the courtroom. This is Abogado.
Good evening. Welcome to Abogado, the program that puts the law at the center of public conversation. I'm Attorney Mike Toledo.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, we shine a light on an issue that affects the way our institutions function, the way decisions are made, and ultimately, the way ordinary Filipinos experience justice and governance. Take a look at our proposition.
Bribery. It's one of the oldest and most stubborn forms of corruption. From small favors to billion-peso deals, it erodes trust, distorts decisions, and robs the public of fair governance. The laws are there: anti-graft measures, criminal penalties, rules on public accountability. But critics ask, are they enough? Should we raise the stakes? Some propose tougher laws, heavier penalties, presumptions of guilt when illicit wealth is unexplained, a more aggressive stance on bribery in both public and private sectors. Supporters say it's the only way to disrupt a culture of impurity. But others warn, stricter laws could compromise due process and risk weaponizing the justice system. We ask, should Philippine laws and enforcement against bribery be made stricter with heavier penalties and presumptions to curb corruption effectively?
Arguing for stricter laws is Attorney Lorenzo Luigi Gayya, professor at the UST Faculty of Civil Law, bar Topnotcher, and partner at Divina Law. He advocates not only stricter laws with calibrated presumptions, but also stronger enforcement through independent prosecutors, courts, and investigative bodies, shielded from political interference.
And we also have with us Attorney Antonio Pido, partner at Siguion, Reyna, Montecillo, and Ongsiako. He brings over 30 years of experience in labor, civil, and criminal litigation, and previously served as Executive Labor Arbiter of the National Labor Relations Commission. He believes stronger deterrence, higher penalties, and continuing lifestyle checks supported by forfeiture are critical to curb bribery.
Both guests say yes to stricter laws, but with different approaches on how to make them effective.
Now, before we begin, here's how our discussion will unfold.
We begin with the opening statements. Each guest delivers a focused 2-minute statement, laying out their perspective on the proposition. The conversation then unfolds through 2 key subtopics. For each subtopic, the guests take turns presenting their insights in 2-minute segments. Even if they share the same stand, they are encouraged to highlight different angles, supporting arguments, or real-world applications. After both have spoken, we move into the open exchange, a 6-minute free-flowing discussion where the guests engage each other directly, ask questions, and expand on their points. Once both subtopics have been explored, we proceed to closing reflections, where each guest is given 2 minutes to summarize their key messages. Finally, the hosts step in with their own questions. In this 6-minute segment, the guests respond, clarify, and deepen the discussion, ensuring critical issues are surfaced, even if the guests are aligned in position.
now we begin with opening statements. The question, should Philippine laws and enforcement against bribery be made stricter with heavier penalties and presumptions to curb corruption effectively? Now, Attorney Lorenzo, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, Attorney Mike. For me, definitely yes, there's something that has to be changed because laws on bribery, graft, and corruption have been in place for a very long time now. But as we can observe, corruption is still something that is pervasive in our society, something that is heavily ingrained in our culture. So that means that something is wrong and something has to be changed, whether that is for stiffer penalties, whether that's for enforcement and some adjustments on evidentiary standards during trial. On penalties, for me, I think the penalties under the revised penal code on direct bribery is quite low as compared to other crimes. If I'm not mistaken, the maximum year of imprisonment is 12 years for direct bribery. The same for crimes under the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act under RA 3019. If I'm not mistaken, the highest penalty is 10 years. So I think that something has to be changed there to add as deterrent. Now, on evidentiary standard, I think we have to come up with additional legal presumptions. To cite an example, before, it's hard to prove the crime of hazing, right? But with the anti-hazing law now, there's a provision there that anyone who is within the premises where a hazing right is conducted is presumed to have participated in the act of hazing, which transfer the burden of proof on that person. So maybe that's something that can be done with respect to our laws on bribery and corruption.
Thank you so much, Attorney Lorenzo. Attorney Tony, your opening statement. You
Hello,
have
good
2
af-
minutes.
Good afternoon, Mike. Good afternoon, Karen. Thank you for inviting me here. The penalties are really not that stiff. But I would say that what is important is education and to remove these kinds of offenses from the coverage of the probation law. Because we all know that if the penalty is covered by probation law, which is the law says less than 6 years, it will not serve as a deterrent. Kasi sasabihin ng tao, makaka-probation naman ako eh. Di ba? Okay lang. But if the direction is to remove these kinds of offenses, bribery and the violation of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Law, if these are removed from the coverage of probation, then it will serve as a deterrent also. Kasi mas ihip ng tao, mabibilanggo siya eh. Di ba? Ngayon okay lang eh. Mag-probation na ako, hindi na ako mabibilanggo. Now, another aspect is the problem with softening up the presumption of innocence is it is in the Constitution that a person is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. We have to find ways to soften that up so that the prosecutor will not be in a very difficult situation to prove the guilt of the accused. Maybe some civil aspect can be put in place. For example, we have this Republic Act 1379, which allows forfeiture.
Yeah,
civil
Attorney Tony,
forfeiture.
your time is up. So I
Okay.
think this is something you can go into the weeds of
Okay.
at our next section of discussion. Because
Thank you.
we're going to start with the basics right now. How do our laws define bribery? What forms does it take? And what challenges exist in proving it? Which is what Attorney Tony
Yes.
was already going into. Especially the actual handoff of bribe money. And I think, partner, you all know why this is so relevant right now.
Yes.
Yes.
Because with the whole flood control scandal, yun yung tinatanong ng mga tao. Kung yung mga nag-testify so far, sinabing, alam nila kung kaninong politician dapat papunta yung pera, pero inabot nila sa ibang tao.
Yes.
Will the politician then be set free, or meaning wala bang liability, di ba? So this is going to be an interesting discussion. Let's start with Attorney Lorenzo. Your first opening statement on this point. You'll have 2 minutes.
All right. Now, insofar as the definition of bribery is concerned, we are guided by the definition of the revised penal code. So we have direct bribery, we have indirect bribery, and we have qualified bribery. Now, direct bribery has 3 forms. The first form is committed when a public officer agrees to commit an act in relation to his functions, constituting a crime in exchange for money, gift, or promise. So in this instance, the public officer agrees to commit something that would amount to a crime in exchange for a gift. For example, he may agree to falsify or tamper with documents or destroy evidence. The second form of direct bribery is when a public officer agrees to commit an act which may not constitute a crime, but he did so in exchange for money, gift, or promise. So dito mabibilang yung mga tinatawag nating pampadulas. And the last kind of indirect bribery is when a public officer agrees to refrain from doing his duty in consideration of promise, reward, or gift. So in this instance, the public officer has a certain duty, but he agrees not to do it because he accepted a bribe. Now, on the matter regarding evidence, I would agree that there's a sort of a vacuum in proving bribery cases, because as we know, bribery is something that is done and committed in secrecy, and more often than not done through intermediaries. Where I would relate my suggestion about having certain presumptions in relation to the intermediary and the public officer concerned.
Okay, very good point. I want to ask a follow-up question about that proposal later.
Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney Lorenzo. Indeed, good points that you've raised. Now, Attorney Tony.
Yeah.
Haven't seen you in a while. The last time I saw him was in the golf course. Now, why is it so hard to rely only on direct evidence in bribery cases? And could fair presumptions plus stronger independent enforcement make our laws work much better?
Yes, I agree with that, Mike. The problem with bribery is usually those who are involved are not willing to talk. The bribe giver and the bribe taker.
Oo naman. Why would you implicate yourself,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So they would ask somebody, an intermediary, to accept the money in their behalf.
Yun ba tawag bagman?
Bagman,
Oh, okay. Sige.
collector,
Gopher.
mga front, gano'n. Yan ang mga... Huwag na tayo mag-dwell sa maliliit na bagay. Di ba? Yung nahuli ng traffic, police, bibigyan ng 200, 300 piso. I don't think it's relevant to dwell on those. Sa malalaking bagay, yung sinabi nga ni Attorney Lorenzo, one form is to accept money in exchange for doing something illegal. Ako, district engineer. Bibigyan ako ng 100 milyon, magsicertify ako na completed na yung project. Pero walang nangyaring project. So I falsified. Di ba? I falsified the certificate of completion. That's a criminal act in exchange for 100 million. Doon tayo dapat mag-focus. Paano sila huhulihin? Pag ang tao maraming pera na yung hindi sa magandang paraan, hard-earned money is difficult to spend eh. Yeah. Pero kung napakadaling kitain, tulad sa mga ganong sistema, madali ring gastusin. Diyan papasok ang lifestyle check. Mahuhuli mo talaga eh. Di ba? Magkakasino. Bibili ng Lamborghini. Si 10 mil ang sweldo isang buwan, naka-Lamborghini. Di ba? Saan ang galing yun? Diyan napapasok yung mga ghost project. They commit crimes eh. Certifying na tapos na ang project pero wala nangyaring project.
Yeah.
Oo.
Well, now let's open
So,
the
i-connect
floor.
yun.
Sorry, yes.
There should be a connection between the lifestyle and the bribe taker.
Okay.
Oo.
And since you finished your time for
Yes.
that specific discussion, let's open the floor for a 6-minute exchange.
Okay.
So, attorneys, is there a better way to fight bribery through tougher penalties or like what Attorney Tony suggested, lifestyle checks?
Oh.
Or through reforms that give our investigators and courts more independence with fair presumptions? So yun na yung sinasabi rin ni Attorney Lorenzo. Kasi nga, pagka naman yung nakatanggap, wala naman siyang control sa budget or there's no benefit for him to receive the money, then baka pwede tayong mag-create ng presumption. No? But what are your thoughts? Who wants to go first? Attorney Lorenzo?
Si Toledo.
Yeah, on that specific note, what I was thinking of is we know that if a certain public officer is accused of receiving a bribe, it is usually done so through an intermediary. Okay, now what would happen? Usually, this intermediary and the public officer concerned will be charged together in a criminal case. Now, for the prosecution, it is quite easier to prove that the intermediary received the money. But there's a vacuum with respect to the link between the intermediary and the public officer. That is something that has to be proven by the prosecution, and it is usually difficult without the cooperation of the intermediary. Okay, so in other words, mahirapan yung prosecution kung hindi kakanta yung intermediary. So what I'm thinking of is perhaps if a certain intermediary is a known staff or connected with that public officer concerned, perhaps Congress may consider amending our laws on graft to include a legal presumption that the receipt of money by the intermediary can be attributed to the public officer concerned. And maybe that's true or maybe it's not, but it's something that would have to be rebutted by the public officer concerned.
That's a great idea, no? Kasi para sa mga nakikinig, it doesn't mean na guilty agad yung, let's say, politician concerned. Pero nasa kanya yung burden of proof para pakita na yung pagtanggap ng staff niya ay hindi para sa kanya.
Yes.
Alam mo, before we go to you, Attorney Tony, that's a good point that you also raised, partner, no? Kaya nga, ang sinasabi natin dito, the sort of onus probandi goes to the public officer or the intermediary for that matter. Similar to the forfeiture law that you mentioned, din sa forfeiture law, all you have to do is show that the lifestyle of that public officer or his relatives are way beyond what is stated in his tax return and SALN. Then the shift goes to the public officer to prove that he had legitimate reasons why he has that kind of wealth. Yun na nga, nagkakaroon lang ng issue on whether it is an assault on the presumption of innocence as provided for in the Constitution. So with that, Attorney Tony, what can you add to the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Walang violation ng ng right to the presumption of innocence kasi civil case eh. Yung Republic Act 1379 provides for civil forfeiture. So
And what
walang problema.
about bribery?
Bribery is a criminal complaint. So, may presumption of innocence. Pero kung meron akong, halimbawa, ang public officer na may bagman, nasa batas na mismo na it is presumed na binigay sa kanya kasi yung intermediary niya, go-between lang yun, tagatanggap lang, ang pera para sa kanya talaga.
Wait, Attorney Tony, are you saying that in the current state of the law, yung mga batas natin sa bribery, nandun na yung presumption na pag tumanggap ang isang intermediary na staff or related dun sa main politician, then meron ng presumption na para sa kanya yung pera? Nandun
kasi
na ba yun?
tagatanggap lang siya Kasi pwedeng direct or indirect na pagtanggap ng pera. So pag sinabing indirect, meron siyang go-between, may bagman siya. yun ang tanggap ng pera. Di ba? Nasa batas na yun.
Pero bakit yung mga nakaraang kaso, kunwari yung PDAF scandal, ang nakulong ay yung aide ni Senator Bong Revilla?
Yun na nga ang mahirap doon na Attorney Karen kasi kawawa sila. Eventually, sinasabi nung principal, ay hindi ko inutusan yan. Di ba? Ba't siya tatanggap ng pera? Di ba? Para sa kanya lang? Siyempre, yung tagabigay, ano naman na makukuha niyang pabor doon sa go-between na tao? Bagman lang yun eh. Di ba? Ang problema dyan ay nasa litigation na. Sa pagpapatakbo ng bista. Malamang kulang ang ebidensya na yung bagman ay bagman lang talaga. Di ba? At kaya siya tumatanggap ng pera ay para ibigay sa kanyang boss. Yun ang koneksyon siguro na kulang sa ebidensya.
So wala na kayong papalitan po sa mga batas natin?
Hindi. Hindi na kailangan palitan. Patibayin na lang ang batas. Patibayin ang prosecution. Prosecution. Ang manpower ng ombudsman, kulang. Sa dami ng mga kaso ngayon, kulang talaga. Ang Office of the Special Prosecutor na sa ombudsman, kulang. Kulang po sila. So kung gusto po natin patibayin ang batas, dagdagan ang manpower ng nagpo-prosecute.
Yung sa lifestyle check kaya na pwedeng gawin ng... Of course, the President has already ordered a lifestyle check, no? Of all the
Ano na ba
government
nangyari doon?
officials.
Sino ang nagla-lifestyle check?
Wala pa
There's
akong alam.
no visible
Usually
progress.
dapat one of the definitely the bureaus will be the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Dahil titignan nila yung income tax return, and if definitely there is a huge gap between your income tax return and the assets that are purportedly owned by you, immediately it raises the presumption that you've got it legally unless you prove otherwise.
Yes.
Diba?
Ganun ang
So
batas.
ano naman sa tingin mo? Kailan pa palakasin yung lifestyle check? And kung palakasin, paano?
Yes, Attorney Mike.
But Attorney Mike, before we start, para we can get the timer going, that's actually the next part of the topic, right?
Okay, now we can move to policy rights and risks, no? Attorney Pido, and we'll tougher penalties and lifestyle checks, no? As mentioned earlier at the start of the discussion. Can it really stop bribery without weakening public trust?
Well, yung strengthening of the penalty, ang suggestion ko nga dapat hindi siya covered ng probation law. Para alam na mabibilanggo siya. Di ba? 10 taon. Imagine, 10 taon ka sa bilangguan. Ang problema kasi ang batas, 1 to 10 years. So, pag less than 6 ang pinataw, pwede ma-probation. Di ba? Yun ang dapat tanggalin yung magkakakover siya ng probation. Ngayon, sa lifestyle check naman, ang nakikita ko, sporadic siya eh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pag mayroon nangyari, saka magla-lifestyle check. Ang punto ko, dapat continuing yan. Ang ombudsman pwede mag-lifestyle check.
Motu proprio, no?
Ang BIR pwede mag-lifestyle check. Ang Anti-Money Laundering Council pwede mag-lifestyle check. So ang pwedeng gawin ng gobyerno, yung mga ahensya na yan, buuin niya into one at continuing ang lifestyle check.
Dagdagan siguro ng tao. Like you said kanina, medyo undermanned sila.
Opo. Tulad niyan, kaya nagkakaroon ng ganong kalawak na yung magnitude of corruption. Kasi walang nagmo-monitor eh. Walang nagla-lifestyle check eh. Pero kung nagkaroon niya ng continuing lifestyle check, palagi ko noon pa nahuli na yan.
Palagay mo ba they can do that under ICI? I know ICI was created just to investigate. But since ginawa na rin siya by executive order, can they do something similar na under ICI na rin pero dagdagan lang nila ng tao specifically for lifestyle checks?
Pwede po. Itong Independent Commission on Infrastructure Investigation, meron siyang investigating power eh. Sa katunayan po, and I would like to add, I am glad to add, I just finished my term as Integrated Bar of the Philippines President, di ba? Last July 1.
Yes.
May agreement na ang ICI at saka IBP. IBP shall provide the manpower to investigate reports of corruption. Meron ng more than 1,000 lawyers na nag-volunteer nationwide. Kaya nakakatuwa po eh. Ganun ang nagiging response ng mga lawyer. Ibig sabihin, nakakabahala na talaga. Tsaka walang bayad yan, volunteer lawyers.
Yeah. That's good.
Hopefully, ang direksyon na yan, gamitin talaga ng ICI para ma-solve itong napakalawak na problema sa corruption. Maraming lawyer willing
So,
tumulong.
in the works po yung memorandum of agreement
Pirmado
yan.
na po.
Pirmado na. Kailangan na lang
Opo.
ma-implement.
Nag-meeting nga po kami kagabi sa IBP para na sa implementation.
In the meantime, alam mo kung sino naisip ko yung masipag mag-lifestyle check? Yung mga Gen Z at saka netizens.
oo, sa social
Sila yung
media.
taga-post sa social
Sa social
media.
media.
Lifestyle check nila yung mga nepo babies,
Yes.
nepo wives, and politicians. At pinapalutang nila yung mga videos,
Correct.
yung mga pictures. So, magaling mag-lifestyle check ang mga netizens.
Saka mas
I
mabilis
give
na
them
ngayon
credit.
because of social media.
Yeah,
Pero
oo.
magandang punto na sinabi ni Attorney Tony Partner na maybe magiging pwede nating topic for next time. No? Kaya sinabi mo, the IBP, nagpulong-pulong kayo and you've decided to help out, no? Prosecute, the lifestyle check, all that. But at the same time, maybe there was somebody, a friend of mine raised the argument na sana naman siguro yung mga magagaling na abogado, mga abogado de Campanilla, all the high top lawyers, baka daw pwedeng wag na nilang i-represent yung mga contractors na yan. So, magandang siguro next time on an
Paano
ethic,
naman
on an
yun?
ethic issue, di ba?
Oh, interesting
Ethics
topic
issue.
yan. Kasi ako to a certain
Mas separate
extent,
topic.
I would say they're still entitled, of course,
To
to
defense,
due process.
under the Constitution.
Yes,
Oo.
yes.
Attorney Lorenzo,
Yes, Attorney Karen.
how sure are we that stricter laws on bribery wouldn't be weaponized for politics?
All right. Now, I understand that there's a need to balance, on one hand, safeguarding our public funds and the right to due process of the public officials concerned. But I would say that certain adjustments in our current laws would not necessarily impair the due process of these public officers. For example, I have heard earlier concern about affecting the presumption of innocence if we adjusted some legal presumptions in our laws. But I do not think that is the case because in our current criminal laws, we have certain legal presumptions. For instance, I mentioned earlier hazing. If someone is found in a premises where hazing is conducted, that person is presumed to have participated in the hazing. In a case for anti-fencing law, if someone is in possession of something that was stolen or robbed, that person is presumed to be a fence. And in these cases, the Supreme Court or our Supreme Court has consistently ruled that these do not violate the presumption of innocence because it does not dispense with the prosecution's duty to prove the factual matters, and these are the factual matters that would then trigger the application of the legal presumption. So in that sense, there may not be a violation of the right to be presumed innocent. Now, on the concern of being weaponized as by political forces, I don't think na hindi naman talaga maiwasan yan minsan, but it would really be a policy issue on the powers that be.
Thank you so much, Attorney Lorenzo. Now, again, we open the floor again for the usual 6-minute discussion.
Yes.
Attorneys, where do you think the risks of abuse are greatest if and when bribery laws become stricter? You want to start?
Yes.
Attorney Tony?
The possibility of being weaponized is really a concern. We are aware of the fact that here in our country, penal laws are sometimes used against political opponents. And it would be easy, or it would not be difficult for somebody who is in power to bring in a person and that person will say, ako ang taga-deliver ng pera kay ganito. Di ba? So, kung gagamitan na kagad ng presumption of guilt, kawawa naman yung tao na itinuturo nung nabayaran lang para magsalita. We have to be careful about that, di ba? Ngayon, the presumptions are already in place. For example, sa Republic Act 1379. If the assets or properties of a government official are clearly disproportionate to his income, then it is already presumed as ill-gotten wealth.
And can be forfeited.
No, civil forfeiture na kaagad. Kaya dapat talaga nakamonitor palagi yung lifestyle check. Sa anti-money laundering law itself, nakalagay lang if there is probable cause lang that the asset or the property or the bank account is a product of an unlawful activity, pwede nang i-freeze yan ng Anti-Money Laundering Council for 15 days. Yun ay propose habaan ng 15 days. Presumption, alam naman natin na ibig sabihin ng probable cause, di ba? A crime is committed and somebody is probably guilty.
Hindi pa extendable yung 15 days?
Sa batas, 15 days. Ngayon, kailangan pumunta sa husgado ang AMLA kung gusto nila extend.
May mahabang proseso.
Yes.
Baka in the
Alam na
meantime,
natin.
i-withdraw.
Mawala na.
Kaya ang proposal ko, habaan yung authority, imbis na gawin 15 days lang sa batas gawin halimbawa 45 days. Kasi kulang din sila ng manpower Hindi nila maasikaso kaagad yun. They need more time. So in that sense, that is how to strengthen the law. The anti-money laundering law is a good law. Na pwedeng gamitin talaga
But Attorney Lorenzo, paano magiging matibay yung anti-money laundering law? Considering a lot of the mechanisms to prevent it are in the form of rules applied to banks. When in fact, based on what we're hearing so far sa mga Blue Ribbon Committee hearings, is that the delivery is in cash. So paano yun kung hindi nila i-deposit, nakatago lang sa safe houses nila, sa bahay, sa vaults? Like, how do we prevent that type of accumulating ill-gotten wealth?
I would like to think that most of them would try to launder most public officials engaged in these kinds of things would try to launder their money through banks and businesses.
Or even casino. There's a theory na yung paglaro daw ng BGC boys is
Was to
because
launder. Yeah.
of laundering, not really that they enjoyed the casino. Kaya pala sinusponsor sila ni D. Alcantara.
Kaya minsan, pupusta lang sila ng a certain amount. Pag natalo na, alis na.
Yes.
Papalitan nila ng chips. Let's say, 100 million worth of chips. They'll play, they'll lose 10 million, then they'll withdraw everything.
Kasi parang transaction fee lang yung 10%.
Tapos may resibo na yung 90 million. So clean money na siya.
Yeah.
Yes, so in that sense, I would suggest that the privacy rights of the public officials may be the subject of adjustments, like the bank secrecy law. This is a law that benefits everyone. Perhaps there can be certain qualifications if the depositor is a public official. There may be waiver on their part because they are public officials and are held to a higher standard. But in the instances where money is not deposited through the banks, I would say that this is where lifestyle check would gain more importance, right? Because the only way that you are able to assess that this certain person is living beyond his means is the way he conducts himself through the public. And if something is obviously, if the way he lives is not proportionate to his income, then definitely, and more likely than not, there's something wrong, and that's where the investigator should step in.
Alam mo, partner, kasi talaga, I think I mentioned this in our last show or episode, we have one of the most, our bank secrecy laws is really the strictest. At alam mo, yan ang isang mga inireklamo na nga ng ibang mga bansa. But for some reason, I guess we did a little better because we were off the gray list of the FATF, no? But with what happened now lately, I'm worried that we will be back in that gray list again.
Yes.
Kasi they've been saying we have to lift somehow, make it not as difficult to look into the bank accounts of these people, not wait for a waiver.
Yes.
Yeah.
And talking about AMLA part, maganda na release mo rin yung AMLA. Ay talaga namang, I think it's, tama ka, Attorney Tony, no? It's a good law, but nakikita natin na all these transactions happen, huge amounts of money coming in and out, lubas-pasok Yung mga hindi dineposito, tinago. Pero bakit walang red flags? Bakit hindi nagkaroon ng parang, saan
Hindi
galing to?
nag-react yung bank din.
Cash
Pagka
transactions.
half a billion yung
Yes,
withdraw in
withdraw.
cash.
Oo.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting discussion. But for now, we'll have to pause for a short break. When we return, our guests give their final reflections. This is Abogado.
Welcome back. You're still watching Abogado. And tonight we ask, should Philippine laws and enforcement against bribery be made stricter? Attorney Antonio Pido of Siguion, Reyna, Montecillo, and Ongsiako Law Office, and Attorney Lorenzo Luigi Gayya of Divina Law both answered yes, but gave slightly different approaches.
Now we turn to our guests for their final reflections. Attorney Pido, we begin with you.
Thank you, thank you. As I said, this lifestyle check should be made a continuing activity. And the agencies that have authority to conduct lifestyle should coordinate with each other. At least there are three. The Bureau of Internal Revenue, the Ombudsman, and the Anti-Money Laundering Council. Continuing, not sporadic. Because if it is a continuing lifestyle check, then people will be very much concerned if somebody is watching over them. You know? Naka-relos na $200,000. 75,000 lang ang sweldo, di ba? Another aspect, in relation to the bank secrecy law, the Republic Act 1379 and the Anti-Money Laundering Council, si Attorney Lorenzo is suggesting that to require public officers to sign a waiver. But of course, hindi mo pwede. I-amend na lang ang batas. In relation to the Anti-Money Laundering law, nakalagay doon, if there is probable cause that the money or the property is a product of an unlawful activity, doon i-amend ang batas na pwede nang tingnan ng Anti-Money Laundering Council yung bank account mismo. Kasi may probable cause na sila eh. Di ba? Konting amendment lang yan. The same with the Republic Act 1379, civil forfeiture. If clearly, based on monitoring, lifestyle check, talagang disproportionate yung income niya sa kanyang properties, civil forfeiture, doon, pwede na rin dapat ang Office of the Ombudsman mag-inquire into the bank account of the government official. Yun. Kasi may mga presumption na ang batas eh. Konting amendment lang sa batas yun.
And the impact might be very great.
Yes.
Konting amendment lang sa batas.
Thank you so much, Attorney Pido. Your closing reflections, Attorney Gayya.
All right. Let me start with an anecdote. Okay, so I have a friend who is trying to get a certain permit from a certain government office. Okay, so this friend is straight guy, doesn't want to deal with the hanky-panky and wants to do it the right way. Okay, but this government office every week would ask some corrections with a document that my friend would comply with. The following week, another correction is being asked, and my friend would comply with the correction. And my friend is informed by someone that this is the practice in that government office. They'll make it hard for you to get the permit that you want until you have no other recourse but to give in to the system. Now, this is a problem that happens to ordinary people. Okay, not only the people we see in TV, to ordinary people of all walks of life. And this means that the problem on corruption is deeply ingrained in our system and it's deeply rooted in our society. And definitely something must change. Our laws must be made stricter. Privacy rights of public officials must be adjusted to be less stringent. For instance, bank secrecy should be waived if you're a public official, and lifestyle change or lifestyle check should be something that is institutionalized among and across all public office.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney Gayya. And now let's close with the final round of questions. So I'll go first, partner, if that's okay with you.
Ladies
So,
first,
I
beauty.
think, yeah. Oo nga, at ako lang yung babae dito, so I have the privilege of going first. But I believe that from what I understand, pareho kayo that you're trying to think of innovations in our laws to make, catching bribery and also ill-gotten wealth more efficiently. But one thing that is not clear to me based on the discussion is how you view the current state of the laws. So kanina sabi mo, Attorney Lorenzo, dapat palitan pa yung batas or i-modify siya para magkaroon ng presumption every time you have an intermediary. And I think this goes to the heart of our discussion since we're talking about bribery as an offense, right? Na yun ang laging ginagamit na defense. Even now, in the hearings, parang napapansin ko, yun yung pinatutunguhan ng ibang senators na nakausap mo ba directly si so-and-so? Or sasabihin din ng ibang mga naging witness na humingi ng pera sa akin, pero sabi para kay senator or para kay congressman, blah, blah, blah. So pagka ngayon ba sa batas natin, your position, Attorney Lorenzo, is we don't have a law that would have a presumption na yung kakilala mo or staff mo na kumuha ng pera is for your benefit. But Attorney Tony, you said, no, meron na yan sa batas. Ano yung position mo to say that?
Ang masasabi ko, ano pang presumption ang idadagdag natin? Di ba? Na pag tumanggap ang staff ko para sa akin, nasa batas niyan that bribery can be done through an intermediary. Di ba? Depende na yan sa strength ng prosecution kung paano nila ilalatag ang ebidensya na yung perang yan ay para sa boss mo. Di ba? Ano naman ang dahilan ko, ako contractor halimbawa, para magbigay ng 5 milyong peso sa driver? Wala naman ako makukuha
Or
sa kanya.
staff.
O sa staff, di ba?
Yeah.
Common sense It's just common sense. Ngayon, ang sinasabi ko ang konting amendment, na huwag i-cover ng probation law, yung bribery. Di ba? Para mabibilanggo talaga sila. Pagkatapos, continuing lifestyle check. At least 3 ahensya ng gobyerno may kapangyarihan mag-lifestyle check. Gawin nilang tuloy-tuloy. Hindi sporadic. Hindi intermittent. Pagkatapos, yung freezing ng unlawfully acquired property sa anti-money laundering law, habaan, wag lang 15 days. 45 days siguro. Bakit? Kulang sila ng manpower Napakaigsi ng 15 days.
That's true. At binabagyo pa tayo. Yung pa lang sa panahon na walang government offices. So nakailan tayo last week, right?
Ganon din yung civil forfeiture na pwedeng gawin ng ombudsman through the Office of the Solicitor General. Di ba? Diyan siguro pwedeng gawan ng paraan na yung volume of evidence, hindi kailangan buo na. Sa batas, sa sistema kasi may pag civil action, upfront yung ebidensya Kasama na sa complaint, di ba, Atty. Lorenzo? Yan, pwedeng gawa ng sistema yan. Di ba?
Okay.
Huwag masyadong higpitan.
Atty. Lorenzo, quick reply to that?
Yeah. On the matter of intermediary, I don't think there's any question that bribery is something that may be done through an intermediary. But I would have to respectfully disagree that the law already presumes that the intermediary acts on behalf of his or her principal. It could happen that there would be an evidentiary gap linking the intermediary to the public official. So in that sense, I agree with Attorney Tony that it's right now, our current laws are highly dependent on the skill and evidence of the prosecution. But if we have a specific legal presumption that would link the intermediary to his or her principal, it would make the job of the prosecutor a bit easier and would
It would also make the judge's job easier.
Easier.
Because, di ba, ang criminal case kasi, proof beyond reasonable
Yes.
doubt. So, pag meron ka ng doubt na nakarating ba talaga yung pera doon sa boss mo or doon
So,
sa
wala.
politician involved, then
Ma-acquit.
may reasonable
Yeah.
doubt na. So, ang hirap nga naman
And
i-establish yung
anyway, we're not saying that the public officer is automatically guilty. It's just that the burden of proving otherwise will be transferred to him. So the public officer should present evidence to controvert the legal presumption.
Now, my question to the both of you, kasi there was a senator who raised it during the hearings in the Blue Ribbon Committee, partner. Kung ibalik daw ang death penalty dito sa mga in this bribery.
Yeah, I remember the senator who
di ba?
said that. Oh.
Yeah, di ba? For bribery, whether direct or indirect, malversation of public funds, and a violation of the Code of Ethical Conduct, the Republic Act on anti-graft, and all these laws. 270, 171. Kung ibalik natin ang death penalty, ito ba ay sapat na matakot ang mga taong walang puso at walang kaluluwa na talagang nanakawin ang pera ng taong bayan para sa kanilang sariling kasayahan? Will that be enough?
Ay tingin ko hindi.
Okay.
Malamang makabawas, pero yung malalakas ang kursunada, gagawa ng paraan.
You know, so the other thing I wanted to add before we end this, we have a minute and a half
Yes.
to go, yung pag-hold pala sa mga tao. Kasi sa atin nasa lookout order lang eh. But once you go through immigration, they can't hold you, right?
ang lookout-
kailangan is hold departure order, which requires a case to be filed
Yes.
against
Court,
you.
court lang mag-issue nun.
Oo, so matagal. So dapat siguro
Yeah.
lagyan ng, hindi
Correct.
lang lookout yung ability na i-flag agad sila.
Kausap ko
Pwede
isang-
nang galing sa DOJ or NBI. Tapos
Correct,
pwede silang
correct.
i-detain. Or
Kasi
i-hold. Yung parang hindi umalis ng
yung
bansa.
lookout order ng partner, sabi ng kaibigan ko na dating commissioner ng immigration, lookout, ano ba ibig sabihin ng lookout? Wala, titignan ka lang. Lookout.
Tapos so, and
what
it's
does
so
that
literal,
mean?
no? Para
Yeah,
sabi
what
sa
does
akin,
that mean? Ano
inonote
talaga
lang
yun?
eh. Inonote yung pangalan
Walang,
mo.
okay,
At saan
lookout.
ka pupunta.
Nakita ko.
Oo.
Nakita
Oo,
ko
yun
siya.
nga eh.
Dapat
But they
hulihin.
can't
Tama
prevent
ka,
you
partner.
eh.
Hulihin na
So
kaagad.
ngayon hindi mo
Dati,
na ma-hold accountable
Yeah,
yung tao
yeah.
kasi nawawala.
Attorney Karen, Attorney Mike, dati ang Secretary of Justice, meron siyang regulation na pwede siya mag-issue ng whole departure order. Kaya lang sinabi ng Korte Suprema, hindi pwede.
Hindi pwede.
It's
Husgado lang ang
unconstitutional.
pwede.
Kasi
Judicial function.
constitutional right nga kasi, di ba? Yung your right to travel, right
So,
freedom, yun nga.
theoretically, Attorney Lorenzo, pag magpasa ng batas that allows the executive branch like the DOJ to issue a whole departure order, kahit wala pang case, baka ma-strike
Ako,
down
payag
lang
ako
as
dyan.
unconstitutional. Pero, di ba? Pero
Payag
baka
ako
ba
dyan.
ma-strike down as
Kailangan, di ba,
unconstitutional
muna
yun?
natin sa Kongreso.
Yeah, most.
Basta
Well,
may
we
probable
already have a
cause.
case on that. That was the time of Secretary
De Lima.
De Lima.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
perhaps we could review the Supreme Court's decision and find a way on how we can, how the Constitution could be respected even with that power given to the Secretary of Justice.
Well, anyway, I think
Wala daw
we're-
kasi wala daw kasi sa batas creating the Department of Justice. Hindi amen, dagdagan ng power.
Yes.
Dagdagan na lang. So, pwede sa batas. Oo nga, tama rin. Okay,
Now,
so...
Attorney Karen,
Oo.
since we're running out of time, talagang this is a very interesting discussion. So, very quickly, what really struck you in this discussion?
Actually, Attorney Mike, I want to change the question. Para it's a question that all of us have to answer. Na mabilis lang. Given the current state of our laws and what we've seen so far in terms of what type of evidence is out there, what is your prediction? Meron bang makukulong na politicians? Kasi yun ang tanong lagi ng mga tao.
Sige,
Attorney
quickly.
Lorenzo,
Attorney
just yes
Lorenzo.
or no, like your
Yeah.
forecast.
Kung ang tanong lang is may makukulong, then definitely yes.
So you think yes, kahit politicians.
Yes.
What about you?
Attorney Tony.
Ako rin eh. Tingin ko kasi yung nagtitestigo sa Senado, under oath eh. Nanumpa sila eh. Tapos may tinuturo sila na politiko. So pwede nang gamitin ebidensya yun.
You know, partner,
Testimonial evidence is strong
correct,
enough.
correct.
Oo. Kasi yun yung mga tinatanong sa amin sa non-lawyers, kailangan ba ng documentary evidence?
course, yes.
But I always
Oo.
tell them, testimonial evidence can also stand pag may
yes,
corroborating
to
facts. Yeah.
corroborate. Pero alam mo, partner, if I may, no, and siguro sa ating mga taong bayan, sa ating nanonood at nakikinig, Okay, maganda yung diskusyon, no? Dapat ba may death penalty? Palakasin yung batas. Pero at the end of the day, sa tingin ko, sa aking pananaw, kulang pa rin yan eh. Dapat magbago ang kultura.
Oh.
Dapat magbago ang karakter at kultura ng taong bayan.
Correct.
Kung maski ano pang batas ilagay mo dyan, kung ang kultura at karakter ng taong bayan ay hindi magbabago, wala pa rin mangyayari.
Yeah, super
Tama pa rin
agree with
mangyayari.
you. So on that note,
Agree.
I'd like to share a very short anecdote. I have an American friend that I saw recently dahil nandito siya sa Manila the day before the rally. So
Yes.
he was asking me, should I be worried that tomorrow is going to be violent? I was like, no, Filipinos are peaceful. But he said, why are Filipinos angry only now? He said, Karen, the corruption, as far as I could see, was very much in your face. Like your politicians had fancy cars, some of them had Birkins, expensive watches. So, tama kayong culture kasi sabi niya sa akin ba naman, because you guys normalized it and you accepted it. So,
Good point, partner.
if you demand accountability, this will may mangyayari.
Yeah.
We thank you, Attorney Antonio Pido of Siguion, Reyna, Montecillo, and Ongsiako Law Office, and Attorney Lorenzo Luigi Gayya of Divina Law for sharing your perspectives on this very timely national issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bribery erodes public trust and weakens institutions. The challenge is finding the right balance, tougher laws, smarter enforcement, and independence for those who fight corruption.
And that's why Abogado is here, to ask the hard questions, weigh the arguments, and help our viewers understand how the law can work for them. This is Abogado. Good night.